Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Be sure to check out Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks. TCG Player for cards at great prices while still supporting local game stores. And Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. We are excited to announce our very own custom Dragon Shield sleeves. You can find these on our store along with tons of other Playing with Power merch. We will also be going to the Marchesa 2022 tournament later this month as well. Marchesa is a 2-day Magic the Gathering tournament series featuring over $2,000 in prizes. It will have CEDH, Legacy, and Conquest tournaments. Check the links in the description below for more information. We hope to see you there. Check us out on Twitch every Wednesday evening for great games of CEDH with special guests every week. If you sub to Twitch, you'll get additional perks such as access to our Discord. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Evan piloting the partner pair of Tymna the Weaver and Kraum, Ludovic's Opus. This deck is called Opus Thief, and it seeks to pair wheels with payoffs to gain a massive advantage and win. Evan's opening hand contains a Marsh Flats, Fierce Guardianship, Thassa's Oracle, Chrome Mox, Demonic Consultation, Arcane Signet, and a Chain of Vapor. Next, we have Matt piloting Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow. This is a mid-range deck that seeks to attack with ninjas, trigger its commander to gain card advantage, and kill its opponents. Matt's opening hand contains a Command Tower, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, Polluted Delta, Fourth Bridge Prowler, Verdant Catacombs, Brainstorm, and an Agadeem's Awakening. Next, we have Zach piloting the partner pair of Pako, Arcane Retriever, and Haldan, Avid Arcanist. This deck seeks to pressure opponents with Pako while gaining card advantage. Zach's opening hand contains a Mana Drain, Grim Monolith, Arid Mesa, Mox Diamond, Mana Confluence, Volcanic Island, and an Exploration. Finally, we have Nico piloting Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy. This deck seeks to create infinite mana, find a combo with Kinnan, and force draw its opponents for a win. Nico's opening hand contains a Command Tower, Cephalid Coliseum, Rejuvenating Springs, Treasure Vault, Basalt Monolith, and a Seagate Restoration. Without further ado, let's begin this rowdy, rambunctious round of rigmarole. Evan has the most Star Wars bling in his deck and gets to start us off. Evan draws and plays a Marsh Flats. He casts Chrome Mox. It enters and he imprints Fierce Guardianship. He cracks his Marsh Flats, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Arcane Signet. He passes. Matt draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts Fourth Bridge Prowler. He ends his turn. Zach draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He taps his Confluence to cast Exploration. He plays a Volcanic Island as his Exploration land. He casts Mox Diamond. It enters and he discards Arid Mesa. He passes the turn. Nico draws and plays a Rejuvenating Springs. He casts Prophet of Distortion. Nico ends his turn. Evan draws and casts Thassa's Oracle. In response, Zach casts Mana Drain countering Oracle. With his win attempt thwarted, he passes. Matt draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Lotus Petal. He moves to combat and attacks Zach with Fourth Bridge Prowler. Zach declares no blocks, and before damage, Matt ninjutsus Yuriko, bouncing Prowler back to his hand. Zach takes the hit, and Yuriko triggers, revealing a Tarnished Citadel into his hand. With nothing else, Matt ends his turn. Zach draws, and in his main phase, he adds 2 colorless mana to his mana pool. He casts Grim Monolith. He casts Talisman of Curiosity. He casts his commander, Pako, Arcane Retriever. He moves to combat and attacks Matt with Pako. Pako triggers and exiles Jiraga Tree Speaker, Chrome Mox, Notion Thief, and a Swamp, getting 2 +1/+1 counters. Matt takes a hit, and with nothing else, Zach ships the turn. Nico draws and plays a Command Tower. He passes. At the end of Nico's turn, Evan casts Demonic Consultation. It resolves and he names Underworld Breach. He exiles the top 6 with none of them being Breach and continues exiling. And exiling. And exiling. He keeps exiling until he finds Underworld Breach, which is the second to last card in his deck. The table can't believe what they've just witnessed, and the turn moves to Evan. Evan draws, and with the consultation exiling nearly every possible way for him to win, he goes into the tank. He comes up with a plan and casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting Nico. He searches Nico's library for a card and exiles it face down. With step 1 of his plan complete, he ends the turn. Matt draws and plays Tarnished Citadel. He moves to combat and attacks Zach with Yuriko. Zach takes the hit, and Yuriko triggers, revealing Spell Pierce into his hand, and each opponent loses 1 life. In his second main phase, Matt recasts 4th Bridge Prowler. It enters and gives Prophet of Distortion -1/-1 until end of turn. He casts Hope of Yuriko. With nothing else, he passes. Zach draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Matt with Pako. Pako triggers, exiling City of Brass, Gilded Drake, and Arkham's Astrolabe, getting 2 +1/+1 counters. Matt chump blocks with Hope of Yuriko, and in his second main phase, Zach casts his other commander, Haldan, Avid Arcanist. He plays a City of Brass from exile. He plays a Swamp from exile as his exploration land. He casts Chrome Mox from exile. It enters, and he imprints Arbor Elf. He casts Finhorn Elves. With nothing else, Zach ends his turn. At the end of Zach's turn, Nico casts Mystical Tutor. He fetches up a Pact of Negation onto the top of his library. The turn moves to Nico. Nico draws and plays a Waterlogged Grove. He casts his commander, Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy. He passes. During his upkeep, Evan pays 2 life to cast Noxious Revival from exile, targeting Thassal's Oracle in his graveyard. In response, Matt casts Spell Pierce targeting Noxious Revival. Evan pays for Spell Pierce and Noxious Revival resolves. He puts Thassal's Oracle onto the top of his library. Evan draws for the turn, takes no actions, and passes. At the end of Evan's turn, Matt casts Brainstorm, drawing 3 and putting 2 cards from his hand onto the top of his library. The turn moves to Matt. Matt draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Evan with Yuriko. Evan takes the hit, and Yuriko triggers, revealing Deadly Rollick into his hand, and each opponent loses 4 life. In his second main phase, Matt plays Verdant Catacombs. He casts Chains of Mephistopheles. He ends the turn. Zach draws, and in his main phase, he casts Intuition, targeting Matt. He fetches up a Temporal Manipulation, Capture of Jin Zhao, and Time Warp. Matt gives him Capture of Jin Zhao, and the rest go into his graveyard. He moves to combat, and in response, Matt casts Deadly Rollick for its alternate cost, exiling Pako. In his second main phase, Zach taps City of Brass and Mana Confluence to cast Capture of Jin Zhao, gaining an additional turn. He moves to his next turn. Zach draws and taps Mana Confluence to recast Pako. It resolves, and he moves to combat. He attacks Nico with Pako. Pako triggers, exiling Commandeer, Mystic Remora, and Thrasios, Train Hero, getting 2 +1/+1 counters. Nico takes the hit, and with nothing else, Zach ends the turn. Nico draws and taps his Waterlogged Grove to cast Basalt Monolith. It resolves, and he presents a loop of tapping Monolith for 4 through Kinnan and untapping it for 3 using its ability. He generates infinite colorless mana. He plays Treasure Vault. He activates Treasure Vault, sacrificing it, and creates 69 trillion treasures. He activates Kinnan, looking at the top 5 cards of his library, putting Birds of Paradise into play. He activates Kinnan, putting Llanowar Elves into play. He activates Kinnan, putting Tidespout Tyrant into play. He casts Seagate Restoration. Tidespout triggers, bouncing Chains of Mephistopheles to Matt's hand. Restoration resolves, Nico draws 4 cards and gains no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. He activates Prophet of Distortion, drawing all but 5 cards in his library. He casts Finale of Devastation, where X equals 1,000,000, pumping his team and giving his creatures haste. He attacks Zach with Tidespout Tyrant and Matt with Birds of Paradise. Neither of them can block and die. Nico then gives the turn to Evan. With no cards in his library and no outs, Evan concedes the game to Nico. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a crazy game. Congrats to Nico on his win. Nico did a great job of sitting back, letting his opponents fight each other, and patiently wait for the right time to strike and win the game. Evan tried going for multiple early win attempts and unfortunately had an especially bad consultation, leaving him in a difficult position. But that didn't stop him from still trying his best to win the game. The most valuable card in tonight's game goes to Pako. This card really puts pressure on its opponents quickly while generating insane amounts of value. Being able to pressure life totals while basically drawing up to 4 cards per attack is so insane. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be the king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.